there's some evidence of just to point and to note that not necessarily that it must be the case in this context, but we've noticed in other manuscripts that there's this interesting peculiarity on some of the fees where it's written seemingly as just a wa. So here's a good example. So you can see here on the right side you have this very clear wa, a very clear ink. It's very firm and there's no weird peculiarities about it, right? And you can imagine if the stroke, right, if you on the right side, if the stroke of that pen continued to make the full phi shape, you would expect there to be a similar inking and so forth and consistency between the stroke of the wa slash fa and the Y shape. But like you're showing with the cursor on here on the left side, it appears that there are two strokes going on. You can see how the first stroke, wa, there is a indentation. There's an angle there. Perfect cursor movement, JC. Awesome. You can see that there is a different ink and different stroke happening here. And the reason this is important is that what happened here, if someone added this Y shape after it in a different stroke at a different time with a different intent, they could feasibly have turned the word and into the word in. You've seen those videos online of someone who has a test and it has an F, and they brilliantly add extra strokes, and all of a sudden it says A+, right? It's something like that we're proposing, just as a point of curiosity, but we don't want to get distracted from the main point here. So let's continue. It's just that there is a peculiarity with the wafi. So there's something to note there for your own analysis. But here's the crucial point. So let's go to the other instance. So we have two instances, like I said, of this word of curiosity, handsome, according to Murad. Let's read the other instance, and this one is related to Musa. We read, O ye who believed, do not be as those whom hurt Musa. Then Allah absolved him from what they had said. So this is referring back to when the Israelites were questioning Moses, even after his deliverance from Pharaoh. And this is the point, this is the crucial aspect here, and we're going to see how it's very crucial with the manuscript, how it's written, right? So, and was said, and was handsome at Allah. It's like, okay, the sin will translate as honorable at Allah or in the sight of Allah. So it can kind of like be polished to make it make sense and not be silly. But it's the only other instance of this word. You have the word in the instance of 345, and you have the word here in 3369. And the rendering of Murad is way more faithful than the sin translations, which will say something along the lines of in the sight of Allah and things like this. Murad sticks way more closely to the grammar and says was handsome at Allah. In the sight of Allah. And okay, we'll see in terms of what the Arabic actually is, how this is constructed. But yeah, so this is just the other verse. So we can see here in the manuscript, and this is something worth further investigation. I picked this one because we see a breakup of the word, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're two different words. However, as you see on the left side here with the yellow square, you see after it a hyphen style dash. And you might think, oh, I'm an English speaker. We have, or maybe a Western Latin script, whatever. We have this practice of putting a dash at the end of a line to indicate that the word is meant to continue on the next line. That's not the purpose of the dash in the Quranic text here. The purpose of the dash is to fill out the line. You can see that if you look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up, and you see that there's this sin, and then they elongate it to the end of the verse. And why? Because it's very clean. Right? You have a very clean ending of the line, right? It's very concise. So that's the purpose of putting this dash here, is saying, okay, I'm a little bit before the end of the line. I'm going to fill it out with a dash. Why is he not filling it out in this context with a elongation? Because it's a wa, and the wa does not elongate. The wa is always standalone, and hence he's putting a dash there. So it's not indicating that they're one word. In my opinion, it's more so indicating that they're separate words. And here's the reason why. If it's one word, and all that would happen here is you just simply put a longer dash and ensure that for simplicity's sake and clarity, you ensure that the full word is on the same line, you would do that. The fact that they're not doing that here indicates, in my opinion, that these are meant to be read as separate words, and the implications of that are enormous. And let's see that in the next slide. Well, here's just making the point about dash, no dash. Basically, I consulted GPT. It was looking through the earlier manuscript traditions and academic works on this, and it was suggesting that usually when a word is broken across lines, they don't put a dash, and as in they put as many words, characters as possible, and then they simply continue at the end. But take it with a grain of salt. This is an AI response. The work we're doing is a lot more than just simply this. So let's continue, JC.
I think actually it's also very likely that they didn't break up a word if the consonant actually attaches to the next consonant. But if it is a consonant that doesn't attach, so you would actually have a gap anyway, then they would break it up. Otherwise, they would do these things. They would elongate the words before or after, or they would do things to really make things fit in the page really properly. And when you look at manuscripts, you see these things when a noon will be elongated a lot, or like you've shown before, I think it's an aleph elongated. So they really did try to make it look pretty. And yeah, and this one, that dash seems to align everything. And that's probably the reason. But anyway.
So the question now is, if, and I know I've been sort of like teasing. The suggestion here is, what if, right? What if the word is not wajihan? What if the word is wa, and then the rest of the characters? How would it render? So the first problem is that we're assuming, because of the diacritical rendition, that the H, the frictive ha, is actually a J. But the early manuscripts, they don't have that diacritic, so it's ambiguous, like we said in earlier videos. So what happens if we say two things? One, the wa is not part of the word, it's actually the word and, which it is. Wa means and. Then what? So we have wa, and then we have the rest of the consonants, which is the frictive H or the J, the Y, the yod, or ya, and then the ha, the soft H, and then the aleph. So if we take each consonant as it appears, or could have been, right? We're putting aside for a second. You see on the big characters here in bold, the character for the H and the character of the J, just to make it clear how the distinction between the two is simply one dot, right? So if we don't have a dot there, which we don't in the early manuscripts, of course, not to constantly repeat myself, but if we look there in the table now, we see that the wa would be the conjunction and it's the same exact function in both the Arabic and in the Syro-Aramaic. And then what do we have with the rest? We have the ha, which becomes the heth character, which is the same function, the emphatic or frictive, the ch, right? Rather than ha, it's ch. That character corresponds with the heth character in the Syriac. The ya corresponds with the yod in the Syriac. The ha, the soft H, corresponds with the he, the soft H in the Syriac. Same thing for the aleph, corresponds with the alaf in the Syriac. So once we've now put this together, we've taken out the wa, and now we're looking at just the other four characters. Does that happen to make a word in the Syriac? Well, we're seeing here it's a little bit of a spoiler, but yes, it does. Chaya is a very, very crucial theological title. It means the life. And anyone who's read any Bible knows in multiple occasions, I guess it's two at least from my memory, I guess I'm not reading the Bible enough, maybe there's more, but Christ in his own...
I think we are both reading the Quran way too much.
Oh, yes. I need to stop reading the Quran and start reading the Bible. It's bad. But yeah, so we have in the biblical text, Christ in his own words, self-describing himself as, one, the resurrection and the life, and two, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And we checked, have a look at the next slide, JC. We checked, okay, well, maybe this is just, who knows? Let's check the Peshitta. which would have been the New Testament tradition that would have been predominating in the region of the emergence of the Quranic tradition. So let's look. The Syriac tradition consistently names Christ explicitly as Chaya, meaning the life. So let's look first here at John 11:25. We see, I don't have the full English rendering, so we'll see here. So it's we'll start with Anna Anna, I, which means surely, surely, I am the resurrection and the life. And here you see highlighted, that's the crucial point. You see the Heth, you see the Yod, and you see the Aleph. So that's the word Hayya, right? The Mim, wait, I'm not seeing the Mim there. Interesting. Wait, maybe I made a mistake. All right, go to the next slide. Then we see the other one where we see 14:6. We also see Hayya as being the life, salvation. Oh, sorry. I'm confusing myself here, okay? So the image we're looking at is the root. It's not the full word. So the full word has the H there. It's a rendering of the root. The root is the Heth, the Ya, and the Aleph. That's the reason why it's putting there in the column as a root. This is kind of confusing. We could have done this better. That's my mistake. But yes, everyone can check this. The way that the rendering for this word in the Peshitta, when Christ talks about himself as being the life, as the singular life, he uses this exact orthography of Heth, Yod, Ha, soft Ha, Aleph. And it also occurs very often in liturgical texts from Ephraim, and he's very influential with the Quranic tradition, as well as CPA, Christian, Palestinian, Aramaic, Gospel manuscripts. We see it all over the place. We don't just see it there, we see it also, but used differently, in the Mandaic writings, which, they revere John the Baptist. We've got 40 to 60,000 or so Mandaeans still living today. And they call their deity that they conceptualize of as being the great life. Hayya Rabba, something like that, right? So this idea of Hayya is theologically super dense and important. So if it says Wahayya, that would be very different, right? It would render the verses very differently. Let's have a look.
One sec. Just to add, so because we've seen these words in Arabic and in Aramaic, the only difference when we look at the at the Arabic in the manuscripts, the only difference between these two words that Kash is showing is one dot. That is the only difference.
Right.
Is the wa doesn't join, it would never join whether it is part of the word or not. And now it is joined, and before it wasn't, or part of the word or not. There is no difference in anything of how it was written. The only difference was a dot. And when you look at manuscripts, you will see like the earlier ones did not have the dot. Someone has to, at one point, decide what words are written. And they have to make these decisions, whether you are this wa is part of the word, whether this is not. The rasam, the skeletal form of the Arabic will be quite basic. You will not be able to change it much, even though they did change it quite a bit. But with dots, at the very beginning of the whole thing, they didn't have them. So the guy reading would have to make that executive decision. So even if we look now at a manuscript from the 9th century and we see the dots, it's not like, oh, you see, because oral tradition is like, no. When these books were first written, they didn't have them, and the oral tradition also didn't happen. So even though we have spoken about this for a bit, the only difference between the words is really one dot, nothing else. And then we get to this, to the rendering.
Yeah, the difference, like you're saying, is between the H and the J. The question between whether the wa is part of the word or not is not diacritical. It's simply interpretive. It's about whether you're reading it that way or not. So once you put the J in there and you say, no, this is wajihan, and it means honorable or esteemed, now you've put that very concrete in, and now everyone has to read it like that or else they lose their neck. Okay, so let's read now the full re-rendering of Surah 3:45. And mention, when the angel said, O Mary, indeed Allah gives you good tidings of a word from him, whose name will be the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary. This is the sin, by the way. Daif International, I guess that's what the DI stands for. I like that.
That's what it means.
Nice. Distinguished in this world and the hereafter, and among those who are brought near to Allah. So now we have two options here, because I was not taking a firm stand on whether the fi is meant to be a wa or not. It could be a wa, it could be a fi. I'm not certain, so we're putting both renderings here. The first one, if it is a wa, would be read as so: whose name will be Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, and the life, and the world, and the hereafter, and the one who draws near. I'll go in detail about that in a second after we read the next one. This rendering, which relies on it being truly a fi, to me reads better and has theologically more sense to it. But again, it could be either one. So it reads as follows: whose name will be Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, and the life in the world and the hereafter, and the one who draws near. The word here for the one who draws near is a mim prefix and then qarib, muqarib. And QRB is the same root as kurbana. Kurbana is used in the Syriac literature and Aramaic literature as being the offering, as being it's a title for the Eucharist. And the theology here is that in the Old Testament, those who would draw near, qarib, those would be the high priest who present the offering. So that's where this association comes from, with this idea of bringing near or brought near as being more than simply, the sin rendering of and among those brought near to Allah. Thank you, Daif International. But no, it's a way more profound word, which would befit such a theological, Christological statement that we see here, which seems to have a formulation of the Old Testament structures of Isaiah 9:6, where we see certain things like, and he will be called. We see in one place, he will be Emmanuel, El Gibor, right? These kinds of things where titles are laid upon the individual in question. So in here, it makes a lot more sense. So this is the example of Isaiah 9:6, right? So for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So we see the literary genre here. You have this construction of, and he will be, and then you have title, 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 title. And you can see here what we have highlighted in the blue across the three renditions is these titles. What would we properly find themselves in this kind of literary genre? The yellow is what sticks out like a sore thumb. This is not the type of genre you would expect, right? Firstly, whose name will be Jesus, son of Mary, the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary. All of a sudden, we're stopping the whole name will be, or he will be called, or whose name will be explicitly. Is his name distinguished in this world and the hereafter? Is that a name? I don't think so. Seems more like a description of him being distinguished / according to Murad, handsome. There's something wrong with that. And the rendering, when you understand it as being Jesus, son of Mary, and the life, and I'll go with the second rendering with the fi here, the life in the world and the hereafter, and the one who draws near. And the reason why I put the sacrifice is along the lines of what I was just explaining with the connotation with the high priest. There's this dual usage here, which is very cool, because the one who draws near is the high priest who offers the sacrifice, but Christ himself is also the sacrifice. So he is the sacrificer and the sacrifice. And this is what he will be known as, whose name will be this. He is the sacrifice. He is the high priest. He is X, Y, and Z. He is Hayya. According to his own words, he is the life. And that's what we see going on here. It's that this verse, which was a deep verse with a lot of Christological significance and a lot of theology in it, all of a sudden becomes this sort of a weird thing about how he is distinguished in this world and the hereafter, even though supposedly his work in this world was corrupted, or so I heard. What do you think, JC?
I think this is, something that we will discuss in a future show. how we get pulled into this standard Islamic narrative. So when we read this Daif International thing, well, it makes sense whose name will be the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, distinguished in this world and the hereafter among those brought near. It's like, oh, yeah, that sounds fine, no worries. But it's only once you actually dig into it and see what the meaning must have been that you see the first one, it suddenly doesn't make sense. Like you said, so whose name will be the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, and then what? Distinguished in this world? Is that the name? No, suddenly now the verse has changed and he's talking about what he about his attributes of exalting him in that manner. But the word should be handsome. If it said handsome in this world and the hereafter, there is a big problem. But when we have then this rendering, it just becomes a lot more clear. It would make more sense. And the difference between all of these renditions is actually one dot. That's actually as well quite important. So when we see these other renditions that you've put, whose name will be, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names, just like we have in multiple other places. It is attested that these sort of things were used. We have as well in the Quran that verse that says, Al Malik, Al Qudus, and it has all of these names of Allah, aka Jesus. So we are used to seeing this, but we just look at the standard translations. We assume that it has to be right when it isn't. But something that also I really like about this argument is that one dot only makes the verses make sense. And
Yeah.
also it shows how they are hiding something of incredible importance, which is one of the very important titles.
Right. So you see the difference is either he's distinguished in this world and the hereafter. And the thing is, it's you see in the Daif International, they have to put a hyphen there because grammatically it's missing an and, right? Because they merged the and with the word. So you're missing an and. Where's the wa? We're missing an and. Oh my God, how do we fix it? Daif International puts the duct tape. We put a hyphen there. Cool. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
one dot and a rendering of either the wa being part of the word or not. It's actually not meant to be. And then it reads as the life in the world and the hereafter.
And this thing with the dashes, the same thing happened with the verse about Muhammad and that which descend upon him. Surah 47, verse 2 is the same. They actually have to add the dashes, and suddenly you cannot read what it said, and you think that Allah will remove your sins instead of Muhammad, who is the truth, removed people's sins. So they actually do those things a lot. And this is one of the reasons why we are doing these sessions, showing all of these different techniques the translators and the original writers applied in order for people to not see what the book said. So we are really peeling that back. And these dashes or these translations from Daif International and so on, they're making it incredibly easy to show that they knew what the Quran said in many places, and they actually purposely the they remove they hid the meaning, and they knew what they were doing. But anyway, that will be a conspiracy for another day because